So a few months ago, I partook in Goji Center's hybrid war with a gargantuan titan by the name of Sega Schwanz. And while waiting for the scoreboard to be fully posted by Goji Center, Goji Hagai hosted another hybrid war, this time in the ocean. Well, okay, this isn't going to be the Baltic boss fight, but I'm still throwing my hat into the ring for the region ranging from the shores of Iceland to the wreckage of the Titanic. I'm bringing in an aquatic titan that chooses brute force to annihilate the tiny fish. So, how am I, a railway engineering student, going to go about making a marine animal capable of tackling a 25-foot barracuda with the IQ of an orca? Well, the underlying principle is pretty much the same as when I use Sega Schwanz. Size. Size brings a lot of benefits that many people tend to underestimate. First is more health, which is a no-brainer since more health means more hits. The second, however, is power, since moving that much mass requires a lot of energy, and energy that can be weaponized. Third is armor, since this is mainly just a consequence of material science, since bigger size means more armor and what have you. But the fourth is speed to an extent, since a larger build means also an overall, stride length, and thus a higher speed for a given frequency. Though it's important to note that this isn't always the case. Though agility would be negatively affected by, being huge, there are ways to partially remedy this. Also, since we're now in the water, it makes sense to apply some practices with the naval architecture and engineering. The best person to find that was the Ocean Runner Science YouTube channel. To start off, we need the base gene. And since we'll be dealing with an apex predator, Vexus is an apex predator, it only makes sense to counter using genes from mostly the base genome from other ecological apexes. In the water, there aren't really apex herbivores or scavengers, kind of like on land. Not in the same sense. There's mostly apex predators. And in the whole history of Earth, there have been two types of animals that have proved themselves as the most powerful marine apexes of all time. Mosasaurs and sperm whales. Now, it seems that a sperm whale-based hybrid has already fought Vex. It seems that it might have lost. We'll instead go for a mosasaur for the base gene. More specifically, the Hoffman Mosasaurus. While these powerful marine predators were the best of the Mesozoic, they were still only about 12 meters in length, though they were very much capable of cracking even the toughest of ammonite shells. These massive monitor lizards also had giant flippers that aided in steering alongside a subcarangiform motion. But I also mentioned that sperm whales were another one of those most powerful marine predators in history, so why not include them? Just, not for the base gene. But who to pick? There are some sperm whales that proved even deadlier. A Meg's worst nightmare. That's right, we're talking about the Melville Leviathan, the white whale herself. Okay, although Moby Dick is actually just a sperm whale, just roll with it. These 60-ton absolute giants had absolutely huge teeth compared to their modern counterparts. And even their presence alone used to make Megalodon shipwrecks enough to rebuild, insert city joke here. And with Leviathan being so close to modern-day sperm whales, we can use modern-day sperm whales as a guide as Leviathan without needing to use any DNA from modern-day sperm whales. So, modern-day sperm whales, like many-toothed whales, are capable of echolocation and are pretty damn smart. But the clicks of the sperm whale in particular are a bit special, because they're loud. Really loud, like long exploding loud. Sperm whales are also known to dive really deep, in excess of 1 kilometer deep, which is probably even getting close to 4,000 feet. But what made me favor sperm whales over something like an orca or another dolphin was the skull structure. If we look at the skulls of Leviathan in particular, we see that a large vacant space where the bulbous part of the head would go, usually used for echolocation. But Instead, we can use some of that vacant space for stiffening moves to help accommodate an absolutely devastating bite, which our next contributor will bring in. As far as bite is concerned, few could compare to the mighty T-Rex's 30 to 60 kilonewton hydraulic press of gel, but many people see it as the undisputed champion of biting force in the animal kingdom. But there is another. One that would not only match the T-Rex, but surpasses. Sailed to the Brazilian Perusaurus, the Titanic caiman. These bad boys had a bad force ranging from 50 kilonewtons to 70 kilonewtons. Unlike crocodiles, gators, and caimans, like Perusaurus, have a very broad skull, which allows for a larger cross-sectional area, which means that it will have a lower stress for a given force, meaning you can put more force in for a given strength, stronger bite. And since crocodilians like caimans are allowed in the marine hybrid lore, I'm putting this bad boy in. So, why didn't I talk about the armor of Perusaurus? After all, they're crocodilians, they have osteoderms. Well, that's because the main armor is brought in by another closely related animal, Sarcosuchus. Like the dwarf croc used on the Indom 2.0, Sarcosuchus also had full body armor, with osteoderms covering everything from the neck down. Also, as Goizugai pointed out from when adding the saltwater croc into Vex's genome, crocodilians are really energy efficient, which allows for the hybrid to grow to be larger with the same caloric intake, as well as for greater versatility with temperature. And like the dwarf croc, the Sarcosuchus was probably able to section off parts of its circulation, which would resemble the practice found on ships: watertight bulkheads and watertight compartments, which was a big thing to help prevent sinking. With the two crocodilians in our genome, give the hybrid partial, albeit, I guess, untested, because I haven't done the calcs for that, ability to beach themselves, and have a really shitty degree of ground locomotion, but that's still there, so I guess that's cool. But the thing is, many of these animals are still a bit small. Don't get me wrong, all these were among the largest of their class, but they still feel a bit too small to have an unlosable matchup against a 25-foot shark. Well, shark no, barracuda, yeah, like Vex. A dumb person would probably throw in the blue whale, but the problem is having a baleen whale alongside a raptorial whale may not be the best idea for, say, something like congruence. Given with the other contributors on hand, there is a better animal to do this. An animal once thought to be the heaviest animal to have ever lived, but later revisions, said no. Yep, it's none other than Peruchetus, an early cetacean whose original estimates put it at 340 tons, with later revisions bringing it down to 80 tons, which is much more sensible. Though Peruchetus is only some 17 meters long, so how will that help in scaling up the hybrid? Well, the answer is simple: the skull. Peruchetus had a very small skull for its body length. So, if we scale using the skull, we easily get a length of 34 meters using Leviathan's 3-meter skull, although the final product will have a slightly enlarged skull as a result of the other contributors, with finally clocking in at around 4.5 meters. Also, crocs have long tails. Peruchetus, like the Mosasaurus, also had pelvic fins. Not very big ones, but they were still there, and this would help with congruence. Now, as for why some estimates had it at 340 tons in the first place, it was because of its skeleton, which was very dense. And they also had a very strong ribcage. These two can function like a box girder, something used in ships, formed with the keel, the hull, and the strength deck. This also should help for the hybrid should it ever beach itself. And this is why I chose Peruchetus. We have sheer size and a significantly strengthened skeleton. So, many of you may have been thinking about the echolocation of Leviathan, and how basically no one else in the genome had the echolocation. So, this would indeed, yes, be reduced. But it's not like echolocation is the only method of seeing without eyes. I mean, there is one other method that can be even more effective, as it can track even so much as the nervous signals in your own body. Electroreception. Though electroreception is basically, standard equipment for sharks, there is one shark that was specifically adapted for min-maxing on electroreception. It's my favorite shark, the hammerhead. Yeah, I really don't believe that hammerheads get enough love. I mean, look at those things, they look fucking amazing! But with this making itself in the genome, the hybrid now has a bunch of ampullae of Lorenzini across the slightly bulbous forehead, bulbous because of Libyatan. And since these tend to take up relatively little space thickness-wise, there still leaves a bit more room for the echolocation organs, though it would still be quite shitty compared to Libyatan. But both of these two complementing each other allows for the hybrid not only to hunt in pitch black, but basically also be able to have a complete neural map of its target, allowing it to see if it has any vulnerable nerve structures like a poorly protected brain or spine, and it could also sense if there's anything that it could be hiding, like, I don't know, glass fish fins, maybe? But there's also another cool trick that hammerheads have, and that's called rolled swimming. This involves swimming whilst, rolled sideways, using the absolutely gigantic dorsal fin as a wing to create lift, and this reduces energy costs by about 10%. When scaled up to the hybrid, this can generate upwards of about 100 tons of lift thanks to this method. This would also help with steering as a form of yaw control, which would complement also the subcurangiform motion. And though since hammerheads are the only animal in this genome with gills, there will not be very many gills on the final product. In fact, I doubt that there will even be enough to sustain it indefinitely underwater. But they will be enough to massively extend the hybrid's time underwater, which would have normally been from, say, a few hours to several days or weeks. So, we put these all together, stir it around, give it a nice little there. And we finally get Sioeth, the sea lizard. The species' common name, Cameron Thalassosaurus. Binomial name, Thalassosaurus cameroni. Calculated length, 34 meters. Beam, 3.5 meters. Draft, 4.2 meters. Freeboard, 5 meters. Calculated displacement, 195 tons. Calculated weight, 240 tons. Cruising speed of 35 knots with a theoretical burst speed calculated at 99 knots. Genetic makeup, 50% Mosasaurus hoffmanni, 18% Libyatan melvillei, 14% Purosaurus brasiliensis, 8% Sarcosuchus imperator, 6% Perichetus colossus, and 4% Sphyrna morcara. Sporting a bite force of around 210 kilonewtons, this titan can grind even the toughest of shells and armor into a fine powder. Made possible thanks to that ribbing of the upper skull, partially aided thanks to, I think it was Perichetus, because I think I looked at some skeleton and I thought there was maybe some ribbing on it, and reduced hollowing out on the mandible. Thanks to the flippers and dorsal fin, the density was able to be increased without incurring the risk of sinking. Even with reductions due to Libyatan's few contributions, its echolocation clicks can still reach a mind-boggling 206 decibels, thanks to the logarithmic nature of the decibel. Thanks to the Mosasaurus subcurangiform propulsion and large size, Sioethla is able to easily overtake even the speed-optimized Vex on brute forces alone with short bursts, and even maintain a cruising speed that is close to the swimming speed of Vex herself. This is actually somewhat reminiscent of the performance discrepancy between the Olympic-class liners and the Lusitania-class ocean liners. The Lusitania-class liners, built for speed, had 4 propellers, all of them powered by steam turbines, and consumed 1,000 tons of coal a day, all to get a top speed of 25 knots. Meanwhile, the bigger Olympic-class liners had 3 propellers, 2 triple expansion steam engines, and 1 low-pressure turbine, consumed 600 tons of coal a day, and had a top speed of 22 knots, just barely slower than its competitor. Vex was optimized for speed and did everything to get that speed, while Sioethla was able to just get those speeds just by virtue of being just so big. This also makes him basically impossible to attack, as Vex's maw just couldn't open wide enough to get a good bite. And even if Vex were to go for the fins, the Sarco's heavy-duty armor would just make this a huge pain to get, probably likely causing her teeth to shatter like Hank 1.0's jaw. Get hanked! And even if she were to try and ram him, his armor would just shrug it off, as he would probably be able to easily just withstand even heavier duty impacts. And thanks to his electroreception, those glassfish fins, yeah, he's seen right through that shit. With Leviathan's deep diving abilities coupled with his armor, a Cameron Thalassosaurus like Xiaoyadra could easily dive up to 2.5 kilometers deep, and maybe even more. Now, for a bit of lore on the Cameron Thalassosaurus and Xiaoyadra. Cameron Thalassosaurus was created as a joint effort between the engineering school Eustakia, who had previously created the chainsaw Barathkaiasaurus, and the shipbuilding firm Harland Wolff, which had built things like the Titanic. The first population of these were released into the waters of Belfast in 1992, with the first one being publicly discovered in 1995 by filmmaker James Cameron, with the beast being named after him. As for Xiaoyadra himself, he was first found in 2010 near the Reykjavik airport whilst the planes were grounded due to the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull. It's thought that he had been separated from his mother by some creature, we don't know. Raised by humans, he had become a revered defender of the island, attacking any large sea creatures that trespassed into Icelandic waters. However, thanks to his human upbringing, he's friendly to people and even harmless to ships, to the point that he was recognized as a member of the Icelandic Navy by the government. This weird thing gives Xiaoyadra in particular an ace up his sleeve, as harming him means answering to the deadliest animal to have ever lived: humans. However, Xiaoyadra isn't particularly aggressive so long as you respect his boundaries. Don't annoy him and he won't pulverize you into, mulch. So, if Vex plays her cards right, not only she may be able to walk away, but perhaps even strike a deal with Xiaoyadra, gaining a powerful